Pleasure, of course, to follow the Honourable Lady whose knowledge on these matters is encyclopedic. I will seek to be as short as I possibly can, because I know there are several other colleagues who are keen to get on the debate, and I may curtail some of the more interesting things that I had to say in the interests of brevity. These debates, until a moment ago at least, often are noticeable by their sense of unanimity across the chamber. We are all agreed about what a superb and professional and selfless job our armed services do. And I think that unanimity was typified, perhaps, the superb parade which we had before the summer recess, when 4 mechanised brigade, 120 of their soldiers, led by a Guards band, marched into Parliament through carriage gates. As chairman of the all-party group for the Army, we intend to continue that movement. I hope that subsequent returning brigades will do that. But it was great to see all of the parties in the House, led by Mr. Speaker, welcoming the soldiers to the north door of Westminster Hall. I also welcome the honourable gentleman, member for Stamford, to his place on the government front bench. I well remember the very powerful speeches he made when he was Shadow Defence Minister, speaking from this side of the table, and the way in which he criticised the government so powerfully, so extensively. He said they were dreadful in their defence approaches, and we have researchers at this moment looking into those wonderful speeches, which will certainly come back to haunt him for all of his time on the front bench. Nonetheless, he will doubtless be advancing those arguments now within the Ministry of Defence, and therefore, once again, that's another example of unanimity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, parades are vitally important, and I look forward very much to one which will be happening in Wootton Bassett, in my constituency, this Sunday. But it's not a parade welcoming back soldiers from overseas. It's a particularly interesting debate. Wootton Bassett, quite contrary to the 71% or whatever we've been hearing about people who support the armed services, are a unique town. They have turned out in their hundreds, on many occasions in their thousands, to welcome back the tragic number, I think 147 is the number so far, of coffins that are repatriated through RAF Lynham in my constituency. And the Mayor and the Royal British Legion and the townsfolk of Wootton Bassett turn out in their hundreds on every single occasion. I often go with them. And RAF Lynham, as a mark of that particularly wonderful ceremony, have chosen to turn out this Sunday and hold a parade not in honour of our servicemen, but in honour of the town of Wootton Bassett, who have gone such great lengths to respect our fallen. That seems to me to be enormously important. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the short time available to me, there are a couple of issues with regard to RAF Lynham which I particularly like to bring to the attention of the new ministerial team. The first, of course, is that RAF Lynham is to close in 2012 when the Hercules fleet is to move to RAF Bryce Norton. There is a project called Project Belvedere, as I understand it, within the Ministry of Defence, which is looking at what we're going to do with Lynham after the Hercules fleet moves out. And the Project Belvedere looks into the way in which we could bring all of the helicopter fleets together in one place, potentially at RAF Lynham. I'd be interested to hear from the Minister in his wind-up statement as to the degree to which Project Belvedere is alive and well and kicking and moving forward, because there are reports that because of the £2 billion shortage of money that the MOD are currently experiencing, the Belvedere has been shelved, in which case I'd very much like to know what plans he has for RAF Lynham. And if the helicopters do come there, there are broadly be welcomed by local people, and I certainly would be the lead in welcoming it. But nonetheless, there are concerns, particularly about noise, which will come from helicopters if they are to be there. And I'd like to know the assurance from the MOD that they'll enter into useful discussions with the local community about the way in which we can control the flying hours and the flying patterns of the helicopters in such a way as we can minimise the environmental damage to local people that might result. There's one other issue with regard to RAF Lynham which is very current, which is Mr. David Masters, the Wiltshire coroner, is currently conducting the inquest into the tragic loss of Hercules XV-1239 in 2004 in Iraq. And initial evidence given to the inquest, it's happening as we speak, but initial evidence given to the inquest seems to indicate that tragically, had the Hercules fleet been fitted with foam suppressant in the wing tanks prior to now, and it appears that there were reports within the MOD circulating some years ago suggesting that should happen, had that occurred, there may have been a less likelihood of this appalling crash occurring. Now, I'm certain the Minister would not want to comment on an inquest that's actually happening at this moment, and I wouldn't ask him to do so. But all I would say through the medium of this debate is to the excellent coroner, Mr. David Masters, that, as he has done on previous occasions, when he has come to conclusions that there have been inadequacies within the Ministry of Defence, I hope that if that is his conclusion of the inquest, he will lose no time at all in being very robust and outspoken in the comments that he might make with regard to inadequacies under either party. It's not a party matter, it's an MOD matter. These are vitally important matters with regard to RAF Lynham. I pay tribute also to the other MOD defence institutions that we have in North Wiltshire. We have one supply regiment to Lavington, 10 Signals Regiment, the the people that do communications, whose name escapes me for the moment, 2,500 people in the town of Corsham providing communications for the entire, all three services, and 21 Signals Regiment at Cullen. They make a huge contribution, together with all of the other Army bases across Wiltshire as a whole county. Half the British Army is in Wiltshire, and I pay huge tribute to the contribution which they make. Now, on the question of resources, there are two easy clichés, some of which we've heard, I fear, we often hear in these debates. One is to say that the resources which people like the Army and RAF people in my constituency have at their disposal are woefully inadequate. And certainly there are inadequacies. We've heard about helicopters, we've heard about snatch Land Rovers being not sufficiently quickly replaced, and a variety of other shortages. Of course there are shortages. That's something that has always happened throughout the history of warfare. No general will ever say, I've got more than enough men, more than enough equipment, and I'm perfectly happy. We wouldn't expect them to do so. An equally easy cliché, however, is the cliché which I think the last Prime Minister came up with, which was, whenever our troops need on the ground, they will have. Demonstrably not the case, and a foolish and too easy thing to say. A better debate, I think, rather than this simple, constant backwards and forwards in between those two extremes, seems to me that we should look at what exactly it is that we are doing around the world, and I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman, the member for Newcastle upon Tyne North. And incidentally, I may say that my brief sojourn on the Council of Europe and the Western European Union, in my view, two entirely useless organisations, was enlivened by his contributions in the debates. And I think what he said in this afternoon's debate is precisely right. It's not any good just talking about whether or not we've got enough troops or not, whether or not we've got the right sort of equipment or not. That kind of debate can go on forever. What we have to do, and I hope that an incoming Conservative government will do it, is to look very carefully indeed at precisely what it is that we are doing around the world and why it is that we are doing it. And it does seem to me that with regard to Afghanistan, for example, we're not doing that. We don't know whether it's counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency, counter-narcotics. We don't know whether we're setting up a sort of Guildford look-alike Western-style democracy. We don't know whether we're simply helping people with regard to, for example, a fantastic operation to rebuild the Kajaki Dam. We don't actually know what we're doing in Afghanistan at all. And I do think it would be right for an incoming Conservative government to have a very fundamental strategic defence review based very firmly on a foreign policy basis. I don't believe the last SDR really was all that based on SDR, on foreign policy, and I hope that my honourable friends on the front bench, when they have this onerous duty in a year or 2 years from now, will indeed be doing that. But I think the honourable gentleman from Newcastle North was absolutely right in saying debates such as this cannot simply be about how many troops we have and what equipment they have. It has to be about something very much more fundamental than that. And one last point I'd make on this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is this. We are short of time in this afternoon's debate, and I think that's extremely regrettable. We have few enough defence debates, and the introduction of the topical debate earlier on Thursday afternoon reduces that time even more. I also wonder whether or not the structure which we've set up for these debates over the years, with one of these debates being on defence in the UK this afternoon, is necessarily the best possible structure, the way that the world now is. Defence in the UK, defence abroad and defence procurement are much more interrelated than they used to be, and I wonder if the government ministers or the usual channels or whoever it is responsible for these matters might not like to take a little look at the structure of these debates. As I say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it does seem to me that we should look very fundamentally indeed, not just at the way in which our armed services work, and they do a superb job with the resources available to them, there's no question about that at all. We should look not just at what they're being asked, at how they're doing it, but we should look very fundamentally at the way, at what it is that we are asking them to do. And I very much hope that our strategic defence review, when we come to power in 2 years' time from now, will do precisely that.